What is an absolute truth that no one wants to hear? Conversely, it is possible to make many, many mistakes and come out ahead, and people forget that. They think taking a real risk is out of the question because of past mistakes. And they feel like they cannot afford more mistakes. Like it's been too long, they haven't done enough, etc., and they don't push through, and then they're staring at a wall at 29 going, holy shit, I thought it was too late when I was 20. Now I'm 29 and it's definitely too late. But then you're 52 going, man, my 29-year-old self should have made some more mistakes, they could have handled it, etc. I'm not 52, but I read and interact a lot with people older than me. Anyway, all this is to say mistakes are neutral markers of what works and what doesn't. Doesn't work, fix it. Works, improve it or keep it the same. So take a risk, life's a gamble. Buy the ticket, take the ride, all that jazz. Edit, full quote is better, for life in 2020. No sympathy for the devil, keep that in mind. Buy the ticket, take the ride, and if it occasionally gets a little heavier than what you had in mind, well, maybe chalk it up to forced consciousness expansion, tune in, freak out, get beaten. Hunter S. Thompson. When I was thin, I never noticed it. Then some stuff happened and I gained a bunch of weight. I was stuck in my house during the period I gained weight, so it was just a total 180 when I was able to go out again. I'm no morbidly obese or anything and no one is mean to me, but people just aren't as nice as they used to be. I never realized it until it was gone. Attractive people just don't realize the benefits of being attractive. People just gravitate to you more, it's easier to make friends, of both sexes, it's easier to connect with people and you're given more opportunities as a result. It's not even about sexual attraction, though it can be, but people just naturally gravitate to you more. I never realized how much that was true until it went away. Edit, thanks for the awards. My first ones. I noticed this going the other way. Even as a guy, where theoretically it seems to matter less, I noticed more positive attention and agreeableness from most everyone than I had before. It's not that they were rude or dismissive before or anything. It's that I got glossed over and ignored more frequently. The most uncomfortable part is, after noticing this change in behavior, I realized I've always been guilty of it too. I'm not mean to less attractive or heavier people, but I do focus on them less when I'm not actively engaged in conversation with them. It's weird. And subtle. Exact same thing happened to me. I'd been overweight to mildly obese all my life. Then, about 10 years ago, I dropped a lot of weight and discovered exercise. Without false modesty, I look quite okay now. I really notice how people are just so much nicer to me. It used to be that people either try to ignore me, or show strange smiles because they have to. Now I get attention, people flirt with me and do not get annoyed when I ask them to do something for me. I honestly did not expect how different people would treat you. And just like you, I only became aware that I do this too when it happened to me. I think part of it is the going from fat to thin, or you also feel better about yourself, so smile more and are maybe less self-conscious. Not to say they're not biased, but it's prob not all that. And not only that, but everybody who knows me or even knows I exist will die, and then everybody who knows those people and might even conceivably have even heard of me will die, and so on, and the gravestones and monuments we spend money to have put in to make sure we're remembered, these'll last what, 100 years? 200? And they'll crumble, and the grass and insects my decomposition will go to feed will die, and their offspring, or if I'm cremated the trees that are nourished by my wind-blown ash will die or get cut down and decay, and my urn will decay. And before maybe 3 or 4 generations it will be like I never existed. Not only will I have passed away, but it will be like I was never here, and people in 2104 or whatever will no more think of Stuart A. Nichols Jr. than you or I think of John T. Smith, 1790–1864, of Livingston, Virginia, or some such. That everything is on fire, slow fire, and we're all less than a million breaths away from an oblivion more total than we can even bring ourselves to even try to imagine. In fact, probably that's why the manic U.S. obsession with production, produce, impact the world, contribute, shape things, to help distract us from how little and totally insignificant and temporary we are. DFW. At least pertaining to Reddit where U.S. politics are concerned. We are not a good representation of the voting population in the United States. Mainstream Reddit and the Twitterverse are but a small part of actual voters. Regardless of how overwhelmingly in support of a candidate we all might be, it's not a good indicator of how much support someone, like Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders, actually have. Less a fact and more my opinion now. I think Reddit tends to do their political activism on Reddit only, to where they receive overwhelming support from other Reddit users. It does nothing for their actual community or spreading a message, while still giving them the satisfaction of having made an impact. I think it's important to remember not to get complacent just because a bunch of Reddit/Twitter users support your views and your candidate. We are a very small portion of a much larger population, and we tend to do too much preaching to the choir, so to speak. You can achieve anything you put your mind to is not true. Not even close. Genetics play a huge role in whether or not someone will be a good athlete, or a super successful scientist. Can you be an okay athlete if you try really hard and practice really hard? Sure. Will you break world records or play for a professional team? No. You have to be especially gifted in the genetics department to do those sorts of things. The same thing applies for mental pursuits. Not everyone is smart. Some people just don't get it. You can try a million different ways of teaching a subject and some people just won't get it. Critical thinking, the ability to see a problem and visualize how to get a solution, comes much more easily to some people than to others. Can you sit there and memorize things and get good grades and whatnot? Absolutely. Will you ever be a scientist who does extremely important research and solves the world's next huge problem? Probably not, unless you get hired because of nepotism or dragged along by someone who is good at critical thinking. Furthermore, much of what you can do is limited by who you know. If you're rich or your parents are rich and they know lots of people and have a large social network or a lot of people who want to please them for one reason or another, you'll likely find a job in whatever career you want to extremely easily provided you're not totally inept. If you're the first in your family to get a degree and aren't good at maintaining a social network, you'll likely have an extremely hard time finding a job, even if you are the person best suited for the jobs you are applying for. Even if the job you're applying for is literally what you spent 5 years getting a PhD on, if you don't know somebody, you likely won't get that job. There are a lot of violent people out there and we aren't really doing much to change that. There are a lot of people hurting each other through sexual violence. And no one is ultimately making any effort to change that. Despite the fact that Reddit doesn't want to hear it, there are a lot of people who are attracted to young people. Throughout history, and today. And until we actually acknowledge that, we are never going to stop people from being abused. The best solution for gun violence in the US that everyone could agree on is targeting the causes of violence. Now there will be issues on specific methods which people will debate, but you would be 10 times more effective in getting movement in that area than by trying to fight the brick wall of gun control versus gun rights. And politicians are never going to do this unless citizens tell them to change focus. Educated people have beliefs too. Education alone is not a magic solution to issues. There are a lot of violent people out there and we aren't really doing much to change that. There are a lot of people hurting each other through sexual violence. And no one is ultimately making any effort to change that. Lowering crime rates say hello. Despite the fact that Reddit doesn't want to hear it, there are a lot of people who are attracted to young people. Throughout history, and today. And until we actually acknowledge that, we are never going to stop people from being abused. If you look at it as a percentage, it's not high. Because it doesn't make sense for it to be high. It's about as strongly selected against as you can get on a genetic level, which leaves social and psychological factors. Now, that I can readily believe there's a bit of, to a limited degree. Basically, it's not as many as you think. Thanks for saying this. So I'm a liberal but very pro-Second Amendment and we've been trying to turn the focus of gun control/politics to root cause analysis to address the real problems, and it has been an uphill battle. We have decades of history and studies showing that by and large the left's idea of gun control does not work. I equate it to the right's idea of curbing abortion/teen pregnancy was abstinence and making abortions illegal, in that it's just taking the easy route by affecting the surface symptom.